So, good morning once more. Mike, thank you. Good morning once more. Shaking hands with you already. Now, the title of the slides of the lecture is Smart Locks for Smart Homes, Why Cybersecurity Needs to be Considered. Obviously, this is a title which connects the past with the present and the future. And whoever of you would like to hear now insight tips how to bypass, how to compromise smart locks, from me, firstly, I don't have the competency to do that. Secondly, it would be illegal. So therefore, I will do where I feel quite safe. Namely, I'll talk to you about the legislative and the standardization landscape about it. What will happen? So just to give you an overview on what we will address this morning, a brief look at the agenda. I am from ARGE and representing also SEM Group. So therefore, I will briefly present who ARGE is, and SEM Group you're familiar with. Then we will have a look at the EU cybersecurity strategy, because this is very much the umbrella to what's going to happen also with the smart locks, amongst many other things. And the cybersecurity strategy leads us actually into, that's quite a long title, but it's a quote actually, cybersecurity requirements for smart home products with security functionalities, and that includes smart locks. And then I usually end my presentations always with the one takeaway slide. So in case you would fall asleep during my presentation, just I'll remind you, watch the last slide, and that should be good enough for you to take with you and to remember. Very briefly, as I said, an overview on who is ARGE, and then also SEM Group. ARGE is a European Industry Association. The full name you can see in the logo. This is ARGE, the European Federation of Locks and Building Hardware Manufacturers. And there are 13 such European national associations being members of ARGE. SEM Group is an important one here in Sweden, being the respective association in Sweden. There are approximately 250 companies within these 13 national associations being represented by ARGE. In total, you can say that represents a workforce of about 50,000 co-workers, and the sales generated with this locks and building hardware by these about 50,000 co-workers is more than 10 billion euro. And we are actually celebrating our 70th birthday this year. So we were founded in 1965. And which is important, the last line here, which you can see, is that ARGE is registered at the European Union Transparency Register. This is highly relevant for our work, because obviously this entitles us to hand in documents to talk to people in the European Commission, also parliamentarians, and that is obviously considered to be lobbying, and therefore we need this registration in the Transparency Register. SEM Group you're much more familiar with. Nevertheless, from SEM Group's website, Security in Electronics and Mechanics, SEM Group is the Swedish member association of ARGE and is the natural platform, as it's phrased on the website, and the meeting place for manufacturers and suppliers of physical and electronic security in Sweden. Then companies from small to large in both mechanical electronic security solutions are eligible for membership in SEM Group. And there are more than 30 members in SEM Group. And this actually is the reason why SEM Group kindly invited me to speak here also on their behalf. One of the key ambitions is to provide information on upcoming EU legislation to its members, preparing them at an early stage for its implementation in Sweden. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here invited by SäkerhetsBranchen, where same group is also a member, and SäkerhetsBranchen has this 440 companies as members and 33,000 co-workers. Okay, now what is the aim of this presentation? As I said, possibly disappointing not to tell you about tricks and gimmicks and how to compromise electronic cylinders. It's actually to familiarize you with the EU Cyber Resilience Act, very often abbreviated just by CRA. And actually the Cyber Resilience Act, as we will see, cascades into a number of standards which will be harmonized. I will also get into that. And it includes the door locks for smart homes or smart locks, even not necessarily for smart homes. So the home may stay stupid, but as soon as there is a smart lock in there, it will be pulled into this regime. Now, we are talking about the door lock in the smart home. But before doing so, I would like to share with you this slide. I talked with Jan Segefeld this morning in the car about it. At least in Europe, to my knowledge, this was the biggest cyber attack which we've been experiencing so far. So it was in September last year, September 2025, where Jaguar Land Rover had to shut down their plants for 1 month, 1 solid month, because of a cyber attack. And as it stated here, the estimated total damage to the British economy, and this includes actually the suppliers of Jaguar, this includes also all the other, the carpenters and whoever are then involved in running a factory, to a damage of 1.9 billion pounds. Staying on this corporate side, on the critical infrastructure side, because up to now, cybersecurity was very much seen in this respect, that we have to watch out that our infrastructure, military, hospitals and so on is safe. The Deutsche Bahn, which doesn't have a fantastic reputation nowadays, but they were actually subject to a DDoS attack earlier this year. And as you can read here, they were hit with a cyber attack on its systems that disrupted ticketing and timetable information. It caused outages in travel information, booking tools, on the website, on the Navigator app. So also not nothing, quite serious. So we are here now on critical infrastructure, on big corporations, and I would like to share with you that the European legislator, that they have taken care of this topic quite some time ago. Actually, there have been measures for a high common level of cybersecurity. But as we will just see in a minute, this has not taken into account the private end user, the home and so on. So what was done really was that already in 2016, that means 10 years ago, the so-called NIS was passed actually, and it's a directive, the NIS directive, and NIS stands for Network and Information Security. And this was then repealed and replaced by what is called NIS 2. And NIS 2 is then the updated version, and this happened actually also already in 2022. That means on the European side, the legislator, standardization, they have been very much aware about the cybersecurity threat, but only on a corporate level, on an infrastructure level. Then the first time, if you look at the private end user, the first time it appeared not yet at that stage really in legislation, but in a standard, was driven by industry, by standards writers, and this was the ETSI standard, as you can read here, 303645, and this is a standard which is named Cybersecurity for Consumer Internet of Things. Now, ETSI is the abbreviation of European Telecommunication Standards Institutes. It's one of the three big European standardization institutes. It's ETSI, it's CEN, it's CENELEC. So here we can see that driven from the industry, driven from other stakeholders, from standards writers, we got a standard already, but still very basic, I would say. More or less simultaneously, that happened in 2024. Obviously, starting to write the standard took off earlier. Actually, at the same time, namely a few years ago, the European Commission formulated the EU cybersecurity strategy. And as you can read here, they stated in their ambition, if the move to digital is to be successful, European citizens and businesses must be able to benefit from new technologies without compromising the cybersecurity. European citizen being now already in the game in respect of cybersecurity. The cybersecurity strategy states further that there are three action areas. One is resilience, technical sovereignty and leadership. Second one, operational capacity to prevent, deter and respond. And thirdly, cooperation to advance global and open cyberspace. This EU cyber strategy, as you could see on the slide before, now includes the citizen, includes the private person, the homeowner and so on. And this is seen now the first time in a piece of European, of EU legislation in what I referred to already before, in the EU Cyber Resilience Act, or CRA. Now, what is the CRA doing? And this will be then actually the main topic, plus a relevant standard to be developed under this CRA. What is the CRA intending? It introduces mandatory cybersecurity requirements for hardware and software products throughout the whole life cycle. And it aims to safeguard, and I've highlighted, as you can see here, consumers, because the consumer, again, is in the scope. Consumers and businesses buying software or hardware products with digital elements. Now, the question is, if I were you, possibly would interrupt me and you would ask, what is this? What is a software product? What is a hardware product? This is defined actually in Article 3 of the CRA, and it defines as follows: product with digital elements means a software or hardware product and its remote data processing solution, including software or hardware components being placed on the market separately. So you can say, and Frederick, we had a discussion before, if you have something like this and you open your door with it, you're straight in the middle of the Cyber Resilience Act. Now, another question would be, if I come home and I have my remote control and open my garage door, and this remote control just sends a signal open or close, this is not in the Cyber Resilience Act because it does not submit data, just submits a signal. Now, in the Cyber Resilience Act, obviously, it's considered that not all elements, not all products in the Cyber Resilience Act or falling into the Cyber Resilience Act are critical the same way. So it is so that in the Cyber Resilience Act we have three classes. You see here now this pyramid or this triangle with 4 layers, and the bottom layer is very easy because this bottom layer are all the products with low risk. It's a default category. It's even not defined. It said the legislation itself, the legal text says, if it's not in the class 1, if not in the class 2, and if it's not the critical class, then it is on this bottom layer, in this bottom layer. The product with low risk. Now, I've shown here that that an important product, but class 1, not so serious. This is exactly where the smart door locks are listed in the law, in the legal text. There will be an important class 2, and there will be critical products. So the smart door locks, they would be in the same class as a baby phone. For instance, a baby phone being connected to the internet. Important products class 2, that's already a smaller group. And an example would be a firewall, which you might have on your laptop. And the critical products, they are a very small group of products. And a good example, which everybody knows, everybody has actually, is a smart card, where you have in the smart card, you have a processor. You know, the bank card, for instance, with which you withdraw money. This is a typical critical product. So this is how the cyber resilience is set up. The relevance of these layers is because they require less or more of testing, of certification, and so on. Lots of details still to be clarified, I have to say. We on Tuesday I had a meeting in Germany where we had a lawyer invited, and even with the lawyer not doing anything else than Cyber Resilience Act at the moment, there's still unclear questions. So questions are clear, but the answers are unclear. It is so that, by the way, I do some promotion now for ARGE. What we do is that we take very specific issues which we have in our industry, which you have, you know, with the products I've been mentioning. And as we have a good communication channel with the European Commission, with the respective Directorate General, we address these questions to them. And I will be in a meeting with them after summer. On the 8th of September, we'll have the next meeting where we very precisely pinpoint at specific questions. Okay, so now you hopefully got somehow an overview on what we're talking about the Cyber Resilience Act before we get to the standard which directs to the smart door lock. Next question would be, and I do have an answer, it's the next slide. Is it in force already? When will it get into force? When will I see any difference on the market? Okay, so this is the slide giving you the timeline. As you can see here, this entry into force, and this arrow, it's just abbreviated EIF, entry into force of CRA, was the 11th of September 24 already. Now, like very often with legislation, national legislation, EU legislation, entry into force doesn't mean anything, because in this case it means that the Cyber Resilience Act entered into force, but it didn't have any obligation for anybody, because it's then stated in the legal text that something will enter into force, you know, a specific part of it, in 18 months, in 12 months, in 36 months. And these are the next actually lines here. In the middle, you can see this line, reporting obligations of manufacturers. That's Article 14 in the CRA, 11th of September 26. Now, this is pretty close. 11th of this September 26, manufacturers and importers of products falling under the Cyber Resilience Act in one of the three classes will have the following obligation. As soon as the manufacturer or the importer detects a weakness in the product where the product can be compromised, they have to raise their arm. They have to say, listen, I have a problem. So it's not so that you can say, okay, we have a problem, nobody has experienced any damage and we'll fix it, just give us 3 months or so. This is what kicks in after summer. So they immediately have to report it to two bodies which are stated in the Cyber Resilience Act, that it's even so that if a compromise of the lock hasn't happened, nobody knows about it, you know, you still have to report it. You have to make it official that your problem has this leakage. And then the third line is the full application of the CRA, 11th of December 27. That means by then, products will be placed on the market only under certain conditions, and this is what I will show you in not the next slide, but then thereafter. That means the full application with meeting all requirements stated in the CRA, that takes place 11th of December 27. And I know, Frederick, we talked, and I know many companies, they're working extremely hard in order to prepare their products for this very date. Now, we've been talking about legislation, but it's very often so that the legislation is the umbrella which just also states the fines, and the fines, by the way, they will be very, very heavy. So, for some not so serious breaches, companies can be fined with 1% of their global turnover. It's heavy. But what we need usually under product-related legislation, we need standards going then deep into the individual product lines. And there have to be so-called harmonized standards to be published. And a harmonized standard compared with the normal standard is that the harmonized standard is not only created by the European Standardization Organization, but it is actually then implemented in the European legal system. So you can say it's actually an extension of a piece of legislation is the specific standard. And the standard has then the value and the weight of a legal text. And therefore, as it's stated here, it must be published in the official journal of the European Union. So then it becomes a legal text. And that leads to something what you're very familiar with, that leads to CE marking. That means with the CE marking, you define compliance with the specific European legislation or also sometimes performance. So this is now the part where quite some work is ongoing, namely in doing the standardization work. We have started with the title of Smart Lock for smart homes or Smart Lock for a home. And you can see here I've written one of the 26 so-called vertical harmonized standards to be published under the CRA. Will be this ETSI standard, cybersecurity requirements for smart home products with security functionalities, and that it's also stated includes but is not limited to smart door locking devices, baby monitoring systems, alarm systems, and home security cameras. When I talk about vertical harmonized standard, that means they are product related. There are horizontal standards, which means they are standards on how notified bodies are actually established and things like that. That means non-product related. And we do have this one vertical standard, as stated here, which focuses on this, what is called the smart home products, which includes the smart door locks. Now, this is actually already a mature draft of this standard. By the way, I have to say that I'm pleased to talk about this here in Sweden, because ARGE has been represented in the standardization work of this very standard by a Swedish expert. So he was, I would say, the most appropriate one with his knowledge and deep dive expertise. So he's been representing ARGE in the standardization work. ARGE is a member of ETSI, so we pay membership fee in order that we are allowed to contribute to the standards writing. And Andreas has done a fine job. So this is mature, and it will be finalized after summer, but then it still takes time until this publication in the official journal of the European Union can happen. So roughly, this standard will specify vulnerability handling activities, what you do when you detect a problem with the product, technical requirements, corresponding assessment criteria for smart home products, with security functionalities related to cybersecurity. And I'm getting back to the timeline again. In the timeline, this is what I've shown you before. That gets us here into an important statement, and you will find that again then afterwards. It is so that as of this 11th of December 27, we will have, on the one hand, obviously the Cyber Resilience Act, because it entered into force, as we can see here, already on the 11th of December 2024. That means 3 years later. And we will have, hopefully, we will have all the vertical standards, these 26 vertical standards for these 26 product groups, also published in the official journal of the European Union. And that means that smart locks to be placed on the EU market, and EU market actually means, if you look into virtually all product related, not only product related, but all product related legal acts of the European Union, you will always find on top a small line, and it states relevant for EEA, relevant for the European Economic Area. And the European Economic Area are 27 EU member states, plus Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. So virtually all this legislation always includes, which is of significance to you in Sweden, it also includes Norway and Iceland. Liechtenstein, I guess, is of lesser importance. So when you place a smart door lock, the manufacturer puts it onto the lorry or wherever you ship it, or the way how you ship it. This means placing on the market for the first time. This must comply with this standard and therefore must carry the CE marking. That means if you have something produced and you have on stock and it has been produced on the 10th of December and is not compliant with this standard, and you sell it on the 11th of December 27, you're acting illegal. So you can't say it's a product which I have had on the stock. It's not possible. As of this date, it's a hard date. Everything has to comply with CRA and with the standard. Having said that, it is so that it's a very challenging timeline. It's very, very challenging. It's not only challenging for companies. I know that some companies, they're really, they're up in arms, but it's also challenging for the standards writers. So, I mean, it's a bit looking into the crystal ball, what I'm doing now, but I'll phrase it that way. I wouldn't be totally surprised if eventually a few months before the 11th of December 27, the European Commission would say, we'll expand it by 6 months or so, the timeline. Could be, might not be. It's very, very tough to reach this deadline, not only, as I said, for manufacturers, but also for the standards writers. Okay, because I want to leave also some time for questions. I'm getting to my, as promised, to my takeaway slide. So, as far as I could see, nobody fell asleep. Therefore, you might have memorized the one or the other statement which I made. Anyway, important is that for the first time in respect of cybersecurity, first time in legislation, the EU cybersecurity strategy, which actually comprises a number of pieces of legislation related to cybersecurity. There's not only the Cyber Resilience Act, but there's also the Cybersecurity Act and some more. The EU cybersecurity strategy covers also smart homes, which is very good news. Though it also brings obligations for the manufacturers, for the partners. Also, the relevant standard for implementing the Cybersecurity Act into the product group of smart locks, smart door locks. The development of this standard is on its way right now. And as you could see, there is a mature draft available already. And lastly, as of, and that was the slide before, as of 11th of December 27, smart locks for smart homes, or even if the home is not smart and the only smart thing in the home is the smart door lock, will need to be CE marked under this standard. So nobody, no manufacturer, I have to be precise, no manufacturer can sell a non-CE marked smart lock as of 11th of December. Now, a question would be, and I get to questions, a question would be, and what's about the locksmith? You know, what's about the security installer? They have still products on stock, no problem. It's so that the definition placing on the market is defined for the first time being put on the EEA market. And if a manufacturer, if an importer from outside the EEA puts a product onto the market by selling it to a wholesaler, to a locksmith, or to whomever, then it has been put onto the market the first time. Then it can be sold for the next 5 years. So that's important. It applies on the manufacturer and on the importer. Okay, yeah, so I think I kept the time quite well. There's still time for the one or the other question. I would like to thank you for your attention. I'd like to thank you for having made the extra mile 8 o'clock for an 8 o'clock morning lecture. And I'm available for any questions you would have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hans, for that presentation. It was fantastic to hear about all the details of the good work you have done in ARGE.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I would like to ask you a question, though, just to summarize everything. What would be your best advice to manufacturers and people who are active within this industry here in Sweden? What would that be, the best recommendation for them?
The best recommendation is to dive immediately this afternoon already into this topic, because it will require many preparations. Even if the product itself is fine, you need lots of declarations which you have to make. You need analysis in the company. You need the processes. You need a weakness analysis, because whenever something happens thereafter, it's important to show that you have taken all the precaution and you're also prepared if a vulnerability is detected, that you have an action plan. So do it immediately. And if you have not been exposed to it before, talk to, I don't know, Chamber of Commerce or a consultant. Gives me the answer to your question, gives me a good opportunity, because as I mentioned before, we're also talking to the European Commission, and it's not only for us, but for many other industries. There are these tiny little questions like, you have an installation with 500 of such door locks, old style. And then after 11th of December next year, you will do an add-on of 20 new locks into the same system. What's about the old ones? So this is what we have clarified already with the European Commission, and the next meeting will take place then in September. And afterwards, ARGE will write a guidance document specifically focusing on our industry. And obviously, SEM Group will have that, and SEM Group will happily share that with the members.
Do you think everyone is prepared, or do you think everyone has underestimated the legislations?
I would rather guess the latter one. Obviously, there are some companies, when they saw the Cyber Resilience Act the first time, I know about one company, they stopped product development immediately in certain areas because they said we need clearance before. And I still believe that there are some companies, they are late. Challenge.
Then I think it's a good idea we had this opportunity to to give some light on this issue. And we would certainly have more events like this and have the opportunity to remember people that they need to do some things before it's too late.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us today. And please, if
Thank you for having me
anyone
here.
has any questions, please.
Yes, I have a question. This is also a possibility. You shouldn't be afraid for the future. This is a possibility, I guess, for companies who are in the front run or on their toes, so to say. Would you say that this will change the market for active, smart companies who are in the front run of this issue? Because me as a consumer or a business who needs the service, I would like the highest quality for cybersecurity. This is like the new green tech, more or less. Any ideas about that?
Yeah. Okay, first I would like to just reiterate and emphasize what you just said. For you as a consumer, it's definitely the whole CRA, all the vertical standards are good news for the consumer, because right now it's a very undefined legal setup what we have. Your question, is it an opportunity? I definitely believe it is an opportunity. It's obviously short time, it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity for smart companies to be really fast, be smart in further developing their products. And I believe it's also something very positive where I would say low quality, cheap imports from outside of the EEA will find a natural legal barrier, which is also important. I mean, lots of stories to be told about that, but at ARGE, we initiated with ETSI a so-called technical specification exactly for smart locks under this ETSI standard before the Cyber Resilience Act actually was published, where we helped stakeholders to define what is a secure smart lock. But obviously now with the legal power and with this CE marking regime coming from the legal act, from the Cyber Resilience Act, that will definitely be, I would say, a much better barrier against certain products which lack credibility, which lack security, but are just imported cheaply, bought via Amazon or any internet platform. Yes.
Very interesting presentation. Hi, my question is regarding that cybersecurity is a fast evolving area. These deadlines are upon us, but what about the future as cyber threats moves on and will not stay constant to like this standard might be a very good standard today, but just in a short while new threats will have arrived.
Mm-hmm. This is a question which we even discussed before this lecture here. I would like to answer in two parts. The first part is a general statement, and I think that applies on many more products, not only on our products, on smart locks, namely that technology is developing faster than the legal and the standardization environment. It's just so that the latter one, they're always lagging behind. So therefore, you can never expect from a standard that this is next month's state of the art. Having said that, the second part of my answer is that the standard does not really set any criteria in a way where, when we talked about lock picking yesterday, Frederick, where you say, okay, lock picking in 2 minutes, and then if you haven't picked the lock cylinder after 2 minutes, then the cylinder has passed the test. This is not in the standard. The standard really states on which areas of vulnerability one has to look at. You have to prepare what to do. You have to also state how you will communicate. You have to have in place security patches. You have to, you are legally obliged to keep your product updated. So this is not going into the technical detail. It's giving actually, it's providing, it's stating obligations really. But I fully agree. It's especially with AI nowadays, a standard or a piece of legislation would always be lagging behind the technical possibilities.
Thank you so much, Hans, for joining us today. And I'm quite sure you will be available for questions if anyone has any more questions.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks once more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vi kommer naturligtvis med ett seminarium från Tryggare Sverige. Så varmt välkomna tillbaka klockan 9.